I am intentional.
I will plot and choose my course.
I will not wait to be blown from place to place.
I will do more than just react.
I will choose who I want to be and work to make that a reality.
I am wholehearted.
I will interact with the world from a place of worthiness, knowing my identity.
I will work to be able to feel, understand, and express my emotions.
I will allow my true self to be known.
I will leave my heart open to connect with others in a wholehearted way.
I am a man.
I have the responsibility to provide for my family, both temporally and spiritually.
I will use my special gifts to be able to make the world a better place.
I will protect and defend the vulnerable.
I will stand up when others sit down.
I will engage with others of like mind to strengthen and lift one another.
I am an intentionally wholehearted man. Welcome to the first episode of the Intentionally Wholehearted Man podcast. This is a podcast about understanding our story and how our story impacts how we react and how we show up in our lives. We will be discussing how our worth and identity come from and play into our story. We will also be discussing how we become the men we have always wanted to be. We will discuss being able to recognize the damage we have caused and work to correct that and do better. Even better would be to be able to catch them before they happen. We will discuss how to show up as our authentic selves and how to hopefully build and strengthen these characteristics in our sons and the other young men who are around us. Currently, I am in active recovery and have been leading groups for pornography and sex addiction for about the last 4 years. I love this work and love working with other men and helping them to find recovery and helping them to be able to better understand how the things that have happened in their lives affect how they show up. I have also been doing individual coaching for about 3.5 years, working with many men, working on these same topics. As I start this podcast, I wanted to start with discussing my story and a lot of the things that have come up in my story and how they have played out in my life, how they have affected how I have shown up for my family, for my wife, and just giving a little bit of understanding to who I am. But as well, I think that many of you will be able to connect to what I'm talking about. So often when I share parts of my story with guys, they are able to see what has happened in their lives and see ways that they've shown up badly or ways that things that have happened to them affect them even now. So I hope that as I share this, people will be able to see some of their own story in this and be able to connect to that and hopefully be able to start a very good discussion of worth, identity, and how we become the men we want to be. I also hope that by sharing my story, you will be able to better know who I am, but also all of these things will play in greatly as we go through the episodes I have planned. Podcast was actually something that I had never thought I would do. I've been on some other people's podcasts, but it never felt like something I wanted. But when I decided that I would do this, the topic ideas have just been coming, and it has been such an amazing experience as the ideas have just flown. I've come up with new ideas every day, and so I'm super excited to be able to start this journey with all of you. So to get into who I am, first of all, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, but I always had this feeling like everyone else mattered more than I did. I constantly felt that I didn't matter and that I wasn't important. And as I did some work with a therapist early on in my recovery journey, we were doing EMDR, and we were following some of the different experiences that have left me feeling like I don't matter. And one of the first experiences that came up in that was a time when I was a young man. I was 4 or 5, all right, a child. And I was throwing a fit about something. At this point, I don't remember what. And probably wanted something that my parents weren't going to give me. And as I was throwing my fit, I very distinctly remember my dad saying, "It's a simple case of mind over matter. I don't mind and you don't matter." And we followed that through my life. And the really sad part is as I was driving home from that therapy experience, that meeting, I just was crying because for years I thought that saying of "it's a simple case of mind over matter, I don't mind and you don't matter" was a joke. And I've thought of it as a joke, never realizing how it impacted how I thought of myself. And the worst part is that I said that to my son, that I thought it was a joke, and said it to him, and worry about the generational impacts that has. And it led me to many years of a lot of other things tying to that in my mind, and me constantly trying to chase and find my worth. So as a kid, we moved around a whole lot. As a matter of fact, I went to 4 different schools in one calendar year. I started 4th grade at one school, then went to another school in the middle of the year, and then then finished the school a year across the country at another school, and then started the next year, 5th grade, at yet another school. But before that, we had moved to quite a few different houses growing up. And so I never felt much permanence of friends. It was always a new group of people, and never feeling like I fit in, never really having any friends, and always trying to fit in, trying to find out who I was. As a matter of fact, later when I was 14 and we were moving yet again, I remember I was at a conference and stood up to bear my testimony. And at the end, I said, it was really great getting to know everybody, but it doesn't really matter because I'm never going to see you again. And that was basically how I felt, is that I was on my own and was always going to, nothing was permanent. I wasn't going to ever have any friends. Also, as a teenager, my dad was a leader in the men's group at church, and we lived in an area where people were very transient. People didn't stay there all that long. And so he and I were constantly helping people move in and out. And this was from the time I was about 11 to 14. This was a lot of our weekends was spent helping people move in, move out. And a lot of times other people didn't show up, and it was just he and I. And he always said, "Man, it's so great that you can do the work of a man, and that, you're as big and as strong as any other man." The problem with that, I found out much later, is that when that was all of the praise that I got, or most of the praise that I got, was for showing up and working hard, that became what I felt like I had to do to be able to find my worth. I had to put in a ton of work. I had to prove who I was. I had to be as strong and as big as any other man. And that was from a very young age. And at that time, I felt like and was a short, fat, awkward kid. And it made it so that I was constantly working out, trying to be bigger, trying to be stronger, and always chasing that and having to work to prove who I was. Another thing, as a young teenager, was it felt like I was always responsible for my brothers and sisters. I was constantly having to take care of them, and that became my identity. Is I was always taking care of my brothers and sisters, watching over them, especially because at that time, my mom was teaching during the day and my dad was working at cleaning single day surgeries at night. And so a lot of times I was put in a position of taking care of the younger kids while dad was trying to sleep, mom was doing other things to take care of the family. None of this is to put anything on my parents. They were doing a great job with where we were at. I'm explaining how I processed it and how it became part of who I was and what I thought of myself. Another thing about my family is that we are not a very touching family. We don't often hug. I can probably count on my hand the number of times I really remember being hugged as a kid, or having any kind of real physical touch. And it was interesting because as a kid, oldest of 6, I was very often helping to hold the babies in the family. And it wasn't until it wasn't until recently that I realized that when my wife and I met, we were always fighting over who got to hold the baby. And I realized that that was the only touch that I got a lot of the time growing up, was holding a baby. That was the physical contact I got. And I needed that. So moving on in my life a little bit, when I was 14, we moved from Florida to Arizona. We moved across the country. And to say that the culture and the climate was very different between Florida and Arizona would be saying very little. It was a real culture shock for me and a very different place from the area we'd lived in Florida. And moving at 14, starting 9th grade, as a fat, awkward kid, when we moved to Arizona, I was 5'2" and 180 pounds. By the end of that school year, I was 5'10" and 160. And there were a lot of changes going on at that point. And it was a hard year. I ended up getting into a couple of fights because I said things that I probably shouldn't have, just because I didn't know better. And I was just trying to fit in. So the middle of that year, in English, probably a lot of you have had this experience where you have to do a book report and the teacher gives you a subject. For us, our teacher had put in subjects into a hat, and we each had to draw a subject out of the hat. And I ended up pulling the subject of teen suicide. And I'm going to take a side note here real quick. my entire life, I've had a hard time getting words out, and I've had a really hard time being able to express my emotions or even know what they are, be able to talk about them. I haven't had the words for that. And so as I was struggling that year, and ended up getting this report on teen suicide, I start reading books for the book report, and I start seeing a lot of things that I'm feeling as they're talking about it. And it finally gave me some words to be able to put with some of the feelings I was having. I was never suicidal at that time. I just was really struggling. And so I saw a lot of those things in those books and wanted to try to show my mom, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through right now. It wasn't that I was suicidal. It was just that I was trying to share that I finally had words for what I was feeling and the overwhelm. The problem was, and again, my mom was scared and she was trying to do the best she could and help me. So she reported that to the guidance counselor and to a couple of teachers that I was suicidal. And so I ended up having to meet with the guidance counselor, who was not helpful, and meeting with him 3 times a week. And basically what this did for me in my head was, I can't share what I'm thinking because it's going to get me in trouble. I don't have the right words for it. And if I try to get it out or try to find something to share it, then I'm just going to be wrong and reported. And so I shut down my emotions. I just bottled everything up and had no way to get it out. So moving on, a little bit later in high school, I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I played varsity baseball. I played baseball all through high school and really enjoyed baseball and other sports. I was religious and went to our church's seminary, but at the same time, I hung out with a very alternative crowd, and I liked the alternative music and things like that. And so I sort of felt like I had my foot in all of these different groups, but I didn't fit in any of them. And actually, something that plays into this as well is when I was in 5th grade, I tested well below my grade level on spelling, but above my grade level on math and science. And so I actually got tested to see if I had a specific learning disability. And the funny part about that is when they tested me for a specific learning disability, I ended up getting put into gifted and just about got put into both of them. Again, making it feel like I didn't really fit anywhere. Later on in high school, I had an experience where I was going to go out with a group that I, again, sort of felt like I didn't fit in quite right. And one of the guys said, "What? Why are we bringing him? He's just a poser." And I felt like I had to prove that I fit there. A lot of these things left me feeling like I never had the right words to say. I never had anything. I never fit. I never was right. And fast forward a few years later, I was playing a rugby tournament, and my sister had come over to watch me, and we were playing in Oceanside. And between games, her and I went down to the little downtown area there and found a bead shop. Not even sure why we went in there, but we did. And her and I found beads to make a necklace for me. And the beads that we chose, the center was a yin and yang, because I always wanted to find balance and peace in my life, but never felt like I could. The other one we found was a piece with a buffalo on it. And I always liked that, with that strength, and thinking that I could stand up to the storm. But the third one really ties in here. The third one was, it had 3 different faces on it, 3 different masks. And I chose that because, and I didn't really realize it till much later, those were the masks of the 3 different people that I felt like I always had to be. I was always somebody else. I wasn't me. And that compartmentalization had already happened way back then, because I had to be somebody in different situations. So many of these things left me believing that nobody wanted me around. The only time people wanted me around was when I could do something for them, when I could take care of something. Essentially, what I could produce. It was around this time that pornography came into the picture. First magazines, then some video cassettes. Most all of it was curiosity, wondering about what was there, what other people were talking about. I did not necessarily want to do it and want to be a part of that. I felt like it was wrong, but there was a lot of curiosity, and it brought feelings of being able to connect, and that it somehow brought a feeling of fitting in. I don't exactly know how. But as a teen, I also really didn't understand what love is or how that looked. For years, friends had talked about being in love with other people, and everybody seemed to say, oh yeah, we need to find love and different things like that. But I had no idea what that meant. It was a completely foreign concept to me. And dating as a teen was fairly nothing. I went on a few dates, but it wasn't really something that I cared about a lot at that point. But there was one girl who I really liked. And because I didn't really think that anybody wanted me around or that I was of much worth, it was really hard for me to get the courage to ask somebody out and to think that they'd even want to go out with me. And this person, I'd been working for a couple of weeks trying to get up the courage to be able to ask her out. And I'd finally gotten up the courage. We were at a club dancing, and I had finally gotten up the courage to ask her out, as we'd been dancing together. And then I went to the mosh pit, which was my favorite thing in the clubs that we went to, was a huge mosh pit. And when I came back, she was dancing with this other guy. And I just remember going, man, he's so much better than I am. And why would she even want me if she can dance with somebody like him? And so I never asked her out. Years later, a common friend said that she had really liked me at that time. And it really was discouraging to me because I had let that go by because I didn't think that I was worth it enough, and that I had shut down because somebody else would definitely be better than me. So after high school, I went on to college, and I got a scholarship to go to the university, and academic scholarship. And the problem is I wasn't completely sure what I wanted to do. And when I got to college, some of the things that I was good at and things that I'm not good at really clashed. I am really good when I have a problem put in front of me, but I am not good at just sitting here and reading a book. Just reading a book and then regurgitating what's in it. That doesn't work for me. I can read it and not have a clue what it says, but if you give me the same book with a problem to solve, then it makes sense. Then I can pull out what I need out of it and do very well. The problem is I'd had some great teachers in high school who used my skills and basically would make me do the problems that others couldn't do on the board, and that's how I got my points. College didn't give that, and a lot of it was just on your own book work, and I didn't do well. The first semester I made the dean's list. The second semester I flunked out. This left me feeling like I didn't fit in, and like my mind didn't work right. I didn't work with other people. I didn't fit in with other people. Also in college, dating was interesting. I feel the need to tell a couple of stories here because they really played into what I thought about myself and what I thought about my worth. There was one person who I met as we were going on a tubing trip, and we hit it off. We're talking a lot. I'd gotten her number and was really liking her, excited about being able to get to know her better because she seemed really cool. And then my friend who had invited me on the trip, him and his band were playing, were practicing actually that night. And it turned out she was there too. And we ended up talking again and having a great time. So I was like, man, later this week, I'm going to try to, see if she wants to go on a date this weekend, that type of thing. Well, she ended up calling me and saying, hey, my friends and I are going to a movie. Do you want to go with us? And we ended up spending quite a few nights together, or dating nights together, watching movies, different things like that. And after about a week of her inviting me to go do a lot of things and me not really asking her out, she was like, well, I think we're going too fast. I think we need to just slow down. And I was like, okay, that's cool. She's like, I think we need to just be friends. And I'm like, all right. It was going faster than I wanted it to anyways. And so I tried to be friends and helped her move a bed and some different things. Well, a couple of weeks later, we were doing something and I said that I really liked her. And she's like, well, all you ever were was just a toy. I just wanted to see how much I could play with you. That really hit hard. And it tied into all of these things of, you weren't really who I wanted around. I just wanted to see how much I could screw with you. A few months later, I'd gone on a date with a girl, again, thought she was cool, really liked it. Was like, had a plan for a date to go out to a comedy club. And so I called her and asked her if she'd like to go out. And she said, well, one of my guy friends and I were talking about doing something. But we don't have solid plans, but we're planning to go out and do something. And she goes, if I can't find something better to do, I guess I'll go out with you. Again, reinforcing that you're the second choice. Nobody really wants you. It's just if they have time. And it got reinforced by a lot of my friends who were like, man, if you didn't have bad luck with girls, you wouldn't have any luck at all. And that's sort of how I felt about myself. At that time, and this is something I've realized later, porn was an easy way to find connection. There was no risk. I would not be rejected. I could not be made fun of. I didn't have to perform and put on my mask to fit in. I didn't have to be somebody else. And it became a lot bigger issue. It became a way to escape and to feel validated. So, fast forwarding a little bit to the first night my wife and I met, we were with, I had offered to give a buddy a ride home, and he was taking forever and talking to everyone. And I was just like, oh my gosh, all I want to do is get home. And we're finally leaving. And we come around a corner and we see the girl who's now my wife. And he's like, oh my gosh, we need to talk. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm never getting out of here. I'm never going to leave. And they start talking, and I was pretty checked out. And he and her regularly talked about people they were dating and things like that. And he asked her about some guys that she had been dating, and she was going off about how guys were jerks, guys just wanted to play games, different things like that. And this friend said, oh yeah, that's how Seth feels about girls. And she asked me, so how do you feel about girls? And our friend started to answer. And she said, I didn't ask you, I asked him. And I was like, wow, that's freaking cool. She actually wants to hear what I have to say. And but I told her that no offense to present company, but girls are a waste of time and money. They take time away from rock climbing, rugby, and mountain biking, because that was where I was at that point. I'd had so many bad experiences that I'd rather just spend time playing rugby, rock climbing, mountain biking, those type of things. And besides that, I still had no idea what love was, or what dating was really like at all. And I still remember the first night or first day my wife and I went out, we went rollerblading and had a great time talking. And we get back to our cars, and I'm wanting to ask her out to go get ice cream. And I'm just stammering. I didn't even really know how to ask her out, and she could tell. And she was finally like, so I'm gonna be making dinner. Do you want to come over and have dinner with me? And she helped me along. And so we ended up getting married about 6 months later. It was a great thing being able to date her. But then shortly after we got married, we were having a discussion, and my wife was like, why won't you let me in? Why won't you open up to me about some different things? And I remember, and she's reminded me of it, I'm not going to let you get close enough to hurt me. And that was how I lived a lot of the time, is I wasn't going to let her close enough to hurt me, which really hurt our relationship. And I can't count how many times she said, you treat me like I'm all the other people who have hurt you. And I did. Because wounded people wound people. Also, as my wife and I were married for years, I would call different friends, guy friends, and things, and we'd have great conversations, but nobody ever called me. It really left me so many times in a point of, I cared about all these other people, but nobody gave a crap about me. And nobody felt driven to talk to me or have me around. So I threw myself into work, and I was really good at what I did. I still am. But that became where I found my identity, was in work, in troubleshooting, because I found that I was able to hyper focus on problems and be able to solve complex problems that other people couldn't see or couldn't understand. And it made it so I could move forward in my career. But it also meant that I ended up being on the road a lot. I was constantly traveling, working in different stations in the oil and gas industry, and constantly on the road, which left a lot of separation and a lot of time alone. I remember many times telling my wife, man, I wish I drank just so I'd have somebody to talk to while I'm on the road. Because those nights eating alone and thinking of problems and trying to fix them really wore on me and left me feeling further isolated. But it was the only thing I was good at as far as I was concerned. Another thing that comes in here is my wife loves dogs. She is a total dog person. I am less so. I don't mind dogs being outside, but I don't like dogs in my space. I don't like having to constantly feel like I'm tripping over them or getting them to move, those type of things. So when we bought our first house, we agreed on some boundaries. I personally wanted the dogs to be outside and every once in a while come in. She was not for that. She wanted the dogs to be house dogs and only go out to go to the bathroom. And so we'd set down some boundaries of where the dogs could be. I didn't want the dogs back in the bedrooms. I didn't want the dogs on the couches. And so we made an agreement about where the dogs could be. Let's just say those lasted about a day for some of them. And they were all broken within a week. This led to a lot of times of me feeling like my opinion, what I cared about, what we'd agreed to didn't matter. As well, it became a thing of where my wife quite often was cuddling the dogs and I was cuddling her. I can't count how many times I felt like, man, here, I'm giving you attention and all of your attention is on the dogs. Again, leaving me feeling like I didn't matter, wasn't really wanted there. And the dogs were who she really cared about and what really mattered. So I just shut down and retreated and said, I guess I just have to take care of myself because I don't matter here. And so, I went through many years of not letting her or others in. I had to do it on my own. If I didn't do it on my own, it wasn't worth anything. And so I was unwilling and unable to ask for help. I had to do it on my own. Another thing that plays in here as well is my wife is very quick with her thoughts. She's able to put words together and knows how to get her thoughts out. As you've probably noticed just in this episode, I have to think about my words. I put them together and have to think about them and get them out. And this made it very hard because my wife would just keep talking and I'd try to put something out, but have to think about it. And this very often left me frustrated and angry because I didn't have time to think and get my thoughts out. I felt run over. I didn't feel like I had time to process, and it made me feel like I wasn't being heard. So this left me to either get angry because I wasn't being heard, my opinion didn't matter, I just got run over, or it left me shutting down to just go, fine, whatever, doesn't matter what I think anyways, and left me feeling like the victim, left me feeling like I was just going to get run over and like I didn't have a place in my own life. It felt like things were going to happen to me and I didn't have any input. It left me very often frustrated and resenting my wife a lot. It wasn't necessarily her fault, but I didn't feel like I mattered. So again, I was really good at work. I was greatly blessed that people, despite my not having a degree, could see the things that I was really good at, and they put me in places to excel. Work was something that I could actually do right and where I should focus. The problem is that because I became so focused on work, I ended up letting my family suffer, taking time away from my kids, canceling many vacations because the only way I was of any worth or the only thing I could do was to keep my customers happy, was to keep going, keep pushing. And we ended up canceling vacations and quite a few family plans to make sure that I could finish the next project, get the next project. I was always chasing that because that was the only place where I felt like I could get it right, the only place where I was of any worth. And that was my identity, that I could solve their problems. So fast forward, I was on a really long trip. It was one where I was about 4 weeks into this trip, and I'd been to 2 or 3 different states at that point, and I still had a couple of weeks left in the trip. And my wife and I were on the phone, and she was complaining about some things with the kids. She was feeling overwhelmed, and I was feeling very disconnected and very having a hard time myself. And I tried telling her that. I tried telling her that I couldn't do this way any longer, and that we needed to start looking for a different job because I was just gone too much. And I was having a hard time with her being stressed with the kids and feeling like it was all my fault. But as well, just that isolation and disconnection of being gone for so long was really wearing on me. And I said that, and her response, and I know that she didn't mean it this way, but the way I processed it for sure was a problem. She said that well, we're used to you being gone and we really like the money, so you need to just keep doing it. So that immediately became, all you're worth is the money. We don't care about you being here. We don't really want you here. You just keep sending us money. And again, it went to a place of, well, I guess I just have to take care of myself. And that was where the porn really got to be a problem, and addiction really, really kicked in, because it was like, nobody else wants me around. I might as well just take care of myself. I later learned that porn had become something, a way for me to get away from and deal with my lack of worth and my doubt about myself. Through the years, I had tried and succeeded at avoiding porn for a time, but I could never stay there for long. It was never something I wanted to do, but it was something that I kept going back to. This was another place where I felt like I was a failure. I didn't want to go to porn, but I also seemed to keep failing every time I tried to stop. For a good while there, as I was traveling, before I got into recovery and found a program to help me stop, I remember many days as I was going to work. I worked up in the North Dakota and Wyoming area a lot, and the weather there is very cold, has a lot of ice on the road, and I cannot count how many days I prayed to just have there be some black ice, something, because I felt like all I was doing was destroying my family. And I felt like everybody'd be better off because we had good insurance and all they wanted was the money anyways. And nobody really wanted me around. So everybody'd be better off if I was just gone. Sort of reminds me of that It's a Wonderful Life. That's very real where I was feeling at. I prayed for a wrong way driver. I prayed for black ice. I prayed for something because I didn't feel like I was worth anything to anybody. And I felt like all I did was hurt and screw up everybody else's life. Anybody I was around, anything outside of work, I just felt like I was a screw up. The other part of it is that I kept saying, man, it'd be so much better for my wife because I'm sure she could find somebody better than I am. And it would make her happier and she'd be so much better off. Shortly after that, my wife confronted me about pornography use. It was the second time in our marriage that she'd confronted, or that it had come out. And she basically said, don't come home until you can figure your crap out. Luckily, I was able to find a program that helped me. And for the last 5.5 years, I've been working that program. I have been working to learn and study and help others and move forward. I've worked to become the man who I can help and bless the lives of others, who I can be a resource and a help. But also through that process, I've been able to recover who I am, recover my worth, recover my identity, and recover what I want to be. So I'm working every day to become the man who I've always wanted to be, and to be able to share that. To wrap this up, I want to share something I told my daughter recently about my prayers for those years, about how I just wish that, something would happen, and that I didn't believe that anybody wanted me around and that they didn't care. And everybody'd be better off without me. And she asked me, do I still believe that or not? And I had to answer honestly to her of, it depends on the day. There are those days where, yeah, I still feel like I screw it all up and like everybody'd be better off without me. But those days are far fewer. And it's only when I don't use the tools that I have now, and only when I let my emotions overcome and don't deal with them, when I don't process them and recognize them and don't realize where they're coming from, that they get to that point where they completely overwhelm me. So I have shared all of this, and this is just part of my story, but these are quite a few of the big pieces that have shaped where I got to, shaped who I am and how I've reacted to things. And these will play into future episodes of the Intentionally Wholehearted Man, as I try to talk through some of the things I've learned in recovery, some of the things that I am learning about worth and identity, and how that shows up in my life and lives of guys I've coached. I'm trying to share some of the things that I hope others can relate to and give everybody a chance to better know me, but also a chance to see where we might be going and to identify things that you may be dealing with that you may not have yet understood. I look forward to meeting with you in future episodes of The Intentionally Wholehearted Man.